nation of Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine. But since 2012, we've served with Polish Christian Ministries. Polish Christian Ministries has existed since 1954, serving the nation of Poland, basically helping Polish believers become healthy, growing, self-sustaining, and reproducing congregations in the nation of Poland. Okay. How did you do that? There's no green at the top, but.
Can you do it by hand?
If you can do it by hand, it's not working.
Oh, there you go. Here, you want this back?
Is that not gonna work?
Oh, I guess it is working.
Oh, you're working. Okay. All right. There we go. We'll get back here. Our priorities since 1954 have really remained the same. We provide salaries this now for 52 Polish nationals who serve as pastors and ministry workers in Poland. We provide funds for church building projects. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And really our big focus is to encourage Polish pastors and ministry workers in their setting, in the nation of Poland, in their churches. So PCM continues to move forward, thanking God for his faithful provision. It's working. This is a map of Poland. How many have ever been to Poland? My wife and I have been to Poland. There are 7 countries that touch Poland. During the communist times, it was behind the Iron Curtain. Berlin was the furthest or closest to it. Is just pretty much on the border up there in the northern section of Poland. But in the nation of Poland, which is the size of New Mexico, it's also, since we're, where are we, Sandy? We're in Wisconsin. You guys are probably more familiar with Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio. It's about the same land mass, but there's over 40 million that inhabit the nation of Poland. Polish Christian Ministries is in 40 cities, and there's 48 churches. Can you see red and green on the map? Probably can't read the letters there, but those that are in red are financially supported by Polish Christian Ministries through churches all across America. There's 110 churches in 38 states that give towards these cities, and there's pastors, and many of them are linked. We call them living linked. They're linked with a specific church, with a specific pastor, and from time to time they will actually come to Poland and serve alongside that Polish church. The ones that are in black are the ones that are financially independent, and they don't receive any funds from us, but that's what our goal and desire is. And here's our Polish pastors. They met this past September after not being able to in June when we were there. We financially support this gathering. For them, it's a month or a year annual thing that they do in order to bring encouragement. They meet to receive teaching, they worship together, they pray together. Of course, they strategize on how they can best reach their Polish community in the nation of Poland. Well, this past year was a little bit different because a lot of the talk and the discussions were around how can they continue to impact the Ukrainian refugees that have come to the nation of Poland. 7.1 million have come to the country of Poland. They've gone to other countries, and there are many who are displaced within their own country. But those in Poland, and since February, a lot of what we have been doing in providing funds that go to Poland and to these individual pastors, which was already in place, for several years, they had additional funds in order to really meet a lot of needs. At the core of PCM were face-to-face encounters when we actually go and we're with them in their city. Sandy and I are in country between 4 and 5 months out of the year, teams that will come over, but one of our main focuses is to be in each one of these cities with their leaders, with their pastor, with their ministry leaders, to talk about and to pray with them and to see and smell and taste what their ministry is about. This year was much different, as you can imagine. During this Ukrainian refugee crisis and COVID, just before COVID, Polish Christian Ministries launched a 3 for 3 and 3 campaign. And I'm not going to touch a lot on this because of the time, but we sought to raise $300,000 for 3 projects in 3 years. So 2022, it's November of 2022, this is our final couple months. Just to give God praise, we were able to raise $300,000 in 2 years. So we set our goal at $400,000 because the need was still there, and we reached $400,000 on August 31st of this past year. So the need is much greater than $400,000, but as we receive those funds, we give them out. One of the focuses of that 3 for 3 and 3 campaign was the Christian School of Music. Piece of property and a building was purchased. The picture there on the top, the bottom, the top picture. The bottom, it basically is a school that has, last year had 150 students from many churches in the nation of Poland. They come to certainly be equipped and trained to be better musicians and worship leaders, skill-wise, but they also are as much taught about the heart of worship and why we do what we do and why they should do what they do and how they can best prepare to be the leader, a worship leader in their church. This is Adam Kosewski. We call him our Polish son. We met him in 2003, came to our home, and Sandy taught him English. And in observing and getting to know him at 18 years of age, he was a prodigy. He was a musical genius, a composer, and he has, since 2008, been the Christian School of Music director. And it's been a phenomenal relationship that we've had between Adam and us, and being in the States, being in Poland with him. He's given his life over to ministry. He has, I don't have a picture of his family, but his up here, but he has 3 kids and a wonderful wife, and that work right alongside him. A second aspect of the 3 for 3 and 3 were scholarships for students to attend CSM, but also Polish ministry interns who could serve in local churches in Poland and also sometimes in the United States. The building project, this is one of the building projects, Biała Podlaska. It's started out to be an $800,000 project that is now well over $1 million that we're helping to come alongside. Certainly not all of that. You see the picture, is there a pointer on here?
No.
No? Okay. Oh yeah, there is, but you can't do it on the screen. There, it's all the way up, look at that. Okay, the bottom picture that has the worship center there with the sky, they just got the building, or the roof put on early October, so that's a praise to God. Quotes, this building, they basically quadrupled their size. When this 3 for 3 and 3 campaign started, we had 8 projects that were on the table by January of 2020. By June, we had 17 projects that we're involved in. Some of them are, the 2 I'm showing you here are the 2 large ones. The others are more renovations and not necessarily new buildings. But God has provided, and we're moving forward. A third one that I'll show you is Christian Fellowship West. It's in the capital city of Poland, which is, what's the capital city of Poland? Warsaw. All right, some of you are still listening. And this Christian Fellowship West, of course, is on the west side of the capital city. Capital city of Warsaw is 3.2 million people, a lot of folks just concentrated in one place. They're on the west side. We have now, in 2001, we had 1 church in Warsaw. In 2016, we had 4, and then since then, we've had 4 more. So now we have 8. There's 17 districts. Our vision is to have a church in every district, right, in the city of, capital city of Warsaw. Well, this is located on the 2nd floor of a shopping mall. It's the only church of our denomination, our Christian Fellowship churches in Poland that's in a shopping mall. That's a long story, it's a God story, but they finished their renovation and moving in to their new place in December of last year. Little did they know, then the leaders of this church are Adam and Claudia Delinsky. Little did they know in February that Russia would invade Ukraine, and this church has taken on massive responsibility when it comes to Ukrainian refugees that have come in to the city of Warsaw, and they have needed clothing, they've needed food, they've needed to be housed. They've literally helped thousands of people. This little church, their church became not a place where refugees would stay, but they would come to find housing, to find food, and they would help them. They were having, early in the Ukrainian refugee crisis, we're having 6 different nonprofit organizations that would come together. And you can see, sorry, I'm standing in the same place. I'll block your vision for something. I could. Everybody can see. Can everybody see? Okay. Because I don't need to. I was just looking at this. They have been able to find and work with these 6 nonprofits to really do so much for the Ukrainian refugees. One of the things that they did, that they started when they planted this church in 2016, was they immediately developed a relationship with the social services, the local social services in their district of Warsaw. And we would send teams, we would help with community service projects, renovation of flats, day camps for kids in the park, something that would be a bridge in order to just help their local community. Well, the social services, when the crisis came out, they worked it out so that they opened up a distribution center, which we helped them to fund buying food and baby necessities, and they found a new location. It was 100 yards away from the shopping, on the second floor of the shopping mall. So that's how close their relationship was. You can see the 2 pictures are just all the food. The upper left-hand corner picture is a picture of medical supplies. We were pretty excited this day when several U.S. volunteers came, and we had a lot of medical supplies. Those were all being shipped and taken into Ukraine. This past summer we had 3 sessions, 2 weeks each session, where folks came over. We served in Warsaw, or in Warsaw West, all 3 of those sessions, but we were in 15 different locations over the course of those three sessions, helping with Ukrainian refugees. This is my daughter. And if I had a pointer, I'd point at her. She's at the end of the table. They're having coffee, tea, and conversation at the church on the second floor of the shopping mall. And once they got their food, or even before they got their food, they would come to the church for coffee, tea, conversation. And our daughter is a family therapist. She listened a lot, and she prayed a lot. She cried a lot as she shared. She was with these Ukrainian mothers, for the most part, and grandmothers. If you were 18 to 60 and you were male, you couldn't leave Ukraine. That's still a mandatory, because you would stay and fight. The only exemption, you could be exempt if you had 3 or more children who were 18 years of age or younger. Otherwise, you couldn't get across the border. So of these Ukrainian refugees, most of them were young mothers with young children. And even I know some of the husbands that could have left didn't leave, and they stayed and they remained fighting. So Galina is a special lady that her story is amazing, how she, with her family, came out of Ukraine. But the story the story I'll tell this morning is Maria and Sophia. In that second picture, Maria's in the middle, in the back. They're twins. But Maria, on February 24th, there was rockets and loud explosions in their city. She took her 3-month-old and her 4-year-old and her husband. They went to their cellar. They stayed there for 3 or 4 days before they made a hard decision that the husband wanted Maria and the 2 children to go to Poland. And so they did. The thing is, though, they didn't have a vehicle. They didn't have a bus ticket. And I don't actually know how they got from their city to the Polish Ukrainian border. But when they got to the border, they were not allowed to cross the border because they weren't on a vehicle. You can't cross the border by foot. It's guarded, and they just don't let anybody cross the border. So there was a very kind-hearted bus driver who said, you can take your 3-month-old and your 4-year-old, and if you'll go back where the luggage is and sit on the luggage, I will drive you across the border. So she also made her way from the border into Warsaw, to the Warsaw West distribution center, where she received food and clothing, baby necessities, and they helped her find housing. Today, she is helping at the distribution center, and later her sister Sophia, with her 3 children, came, and they're in the same apartment. This story could be told over and over and over, literally millions of times, because of the situation that's going on. Today, on a Sunday morning, also, Sophia and Maria will come to the church early, and they will bake pastries and goods for the whole church, just to say thank you for what you've done and what you're continuing to do and what you've provided for us. Well, with the saturation of housing in Warsaw, there's over 500,000 refugees who come to the city of Warsaw, and hotels, apartments, homes. In most of our churches, there are 48 of them, most of our churches, every member in the church has at least one Ukrainian family, a young mother and 2 children. They'll take one of the bedrooms, and that has become theirs. Some families have 2 families, Ukrainian families. Always thinking we'll help them find housing somewhere else. That's worked out many times over, but there became a saturation. So Adam, as you met earlier, he would go around the city of Warsaw, and he would see an empty building and say, that building looks empty. So he made a contact with 2 buildings. This became a hostel. It was a former seed firm factory, a company. That's what it was. It's 5 stories. Of the 3 sessions that we took over, a group of 8 guys, they were busy at work making kitchen cabinets for the top 4 floors. There were already 100 refugees living there out of what was already there. So rebuilt the top 4 floors. The bottom floor became a kitchen, children's play area. There's 3 rooms. The intention was to have that as a school for Ukrainian kids, taught by Ukrainian teachers. It wasn't accredited, but in times of war, you make exceptions for things like this. My crew, the one crew that I was on, we made bunk beds. Fortunately, we were able to get the bunk beds to the room and then make it, because there was no elevator on this 5-story building to get it up to the top floor, to the room that we were supposed to get it to, and then make that bunk bed. It was a lot of work, but today there's over 200 Ukrainian refugees that are staying in this building. And after everyone was in there, we did this a couple times, but on July 4th of this year, this will be a July 4th that Sandy and I will not forget, because we came to this hostel, and we were able, with the generosity of folks that had sent things ahead, we were able to give kids quilts. We provided shoes. See, they came with 1 pair of shoes typically, and it was winter time when they came, so they didn't have summer shoes. Bibles, scripture cards. We asked how we can pray for them, which seemed like a very, we knew how we could pray for them because of the situation they were in, but they would tell us their story, and we could almost tell one story, and it was the same story of how they had to leave in the middle of the night to get out of fire and to come to a safe place. And typically the husband was not there because he was not allowed. It was mother and children. Sometimes grandma was there as well. And we were thankful that we were able to do this. Across town, Warsaw South, something very similar was going on, a different feel to it, but this Warsaw South distribution center literally has served thousands of people. And today, I just got this report from Mark Sabotka that they have a restaurant across the street that has given them a couple of hours every morning to cook meals, and they have 3 Ukrainian ladies that come in and prepare 120 meals every day, and they then hot meals that they then give out to those that will come. Another church in Warsaw, and I could tell you about 27 churches, but I'm only going to tell you about a few of them. Pulaska, this is where our office apartment is. This is where kind of our hub, our headquarters. You come to Warsaw, Poland, we invite you to Pulaska, the church there. But this church is 300 yards away from the Ukrainian embassy. And when these Ukrainian refugees left the country, they didn't have proper papers, they didn't have proper documents. Many times it had to be, sent afterwards, or they had to go back and get them. There's a lot of chaos. But at the beginning, in March and April, the lines were all 300 yards long just to get into the embassy. And so what Pulaska decided to do was open up their building for coffee, pastries, warmth, but most importantly, 2 Xerox copy machines that folks, they were finding that they had need to make copies before they went to Ukraine. They would get the Ukrainian embassy, didn't have copies of what they needed, and so they had to go find somewhere. So they were coming here. It also became a place where you could stay 1 or 2 nights, because you would get in line and the embassy would close at 7 o'clock at night, and you had to come back the next day. So they would allow those that were in line to stay overnight, and they were housing many, many people. Just one night. Pulaski ended up serving 3 meals a day. Volunteers that we would send to this location, their assignment was to make sandwiches all day, from 6 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. I mean, they probably ate 1 or 2 along the way, but just to make it through. But they made sandwiches. The same building, they had an empty building, and they quickly transformed it into a Ukrainian kindergarten class. They have, this fall, they have 2 rooms that are now Ukrainian kindergarten classes taught by Ukrainian teachers in their own language. Astruda Camp, we were on a Zoom call with them on February 26th, and they said, "Sorry, David, thank you for calling," and they were telling us what was going on because they were receiving their first Ukrainian refugees. This camp has served, this is the first place we went, Sandy and I went in 1996, and it's deep in our heart and our relationship with them, as that first year we were part of a worship and music conference. My wife does very well in everything music, but also has a heart for worship and how God wants to use music. And I was able to be on that team, and we became in a relationship with churches all over Poland as that one conference. And at the height of this Ukrainian refugee crisis, which is still going on and which is still intense, there were 191 Ukrainian refugees who were staying at the camp. Now, during a normal summer week of camp, they have 120 beds. So every living space, every classroom, the chapel that they bought this in 1971. The chapel had never had heating or air conditioning. They just finished it in January of this year, not knowing what was about ready to come. So there were 40 or so people just staying in the chapel in the main area as they made living space for that. So the city of Astruda in that region responded in wonderful ways. They would come and take 10 kids at a time to a water park. In the bottom picture, they're singing Happy Birthday to a girl that turned 10 years of age. She didn't think she was going to have a birthday party, but it turned out being a little bit bigger than what it probably would have been elsewhere. And she was crying. We have that video. On the campgrounds too, they put up this large tent. People in the community brought clothes. We really didn't have a need to send clothes because Poland responded and Europe responded with clothes. When we were there, we boxed up over 160 boxes that were to be sent on into Ukraine. That's happened in Astruda. They also had temporary temporary housing units that basically, we called them containers. They wanted to have Polish camps this summer, but they did not want to say Ukrainian refugees, you can't live here anymore, right? You can't, we're gonna kick you out on the street. So they provided them with air-conditioned, brand new bunk beds and a place to stay. They've just recently been removed, and the camp is now going back to not having their own retreats, but it's just a refugee camp. A city up near on the Baltic Sea, Gdynia, a beautiful city. The church, one of the ladies in the church was affiliated with Unwed Mothers, but they converted their space to 20 beds and a place for those Ukrainian refugees that came who were pregnant. They hadn't delivered yet, and they wanted to make sure they were well taken care of up until pregnancy, and they can stay 3 months later. Their 20 beds have been full since the war began. Our churches were impacted in unbelievable ways. Many of our churches have doubled in size. Now they're churches like about what I'm looking at right here, what we're experiencing right here. How many are here this morning? Have you already counted?
Nope.
You're a preacher. So 40 to 50, 60 in number churches, they're now having 100, 120. Now they don't speak Polish, they speak Ukrainian. So their services are a little bit longer now because they translate. And one of the things that a lot of the churches experienced, well, all the pastors that talked to me experienced was, they said, why don't we have a Ukrainian service for Ukrainians? So you can do it in your language. And so they did for like 2 weeks. And the Ukrainians said, we want to come to worship with you. You're our brothers and our sisters in Christ. You've helped us. We want to share that experience on Sunday morning with you. And I don't know, every church that has communicated this with me said, absolutely. We'll just have a longer service and we'll do it together. So there's a whole lot that I could say right now about Ukraine and Poland and how God has used what is just atrocities and just senseless taking of life and loss of home and loss of so much, that how He's brought healing to two nations that over the centuries have not had such good relationships. But God be praised for what He has done amidst this awfulness. He's brought about His purposes and good things. So in our church, this is in Chahanov. I've been there, 8 or 9 times. I was there in May, and they've always had 40, 45. There's 93 in the service. Over 40 are Ukrainians. And you see the 3 up front, it looks like they're on trial. Well, they are a bit on trial because it's their baptism day, and they're pretty nervous right now. They got their papers in their hands. They're about ready to come behind the pulpit there and share their testimony, their scripture, and how God brought them into this relationship. And the pulpit's removed, and there's a space on the floor, and they take it out, and there's the baptismal just below that. We had their baptism day was their day. It was a wonderful day in Chahanov. One Sunday in June of this year when we were there were 32 baptisms in 3 of our churches. These 3 churches 2 of those churches hadn't had but a couple baptisms over the last couple of years, and they were having 6 and 7 baptisms in one day. One church had planned on 19 baptisms at this. They ended up having 22 because there's 3 more that came. About half of them were Ukrainian, half of them were Polish. So God is using this awful thing that's happening to bring about salvation to many in the churches in Poland and those who come from Ukraine. What is still going on right now is a great need to provide for these folks. The church in Warsaw West continues to send 10 tons of food and medical supplies back across the border twice a month. They do it twice a month, 10 tons. Many of our churches are doing the relationships that they now have, that they didn't have before the Ukrainian, what was going on. They didn't know these pastors. They didn't know these churches in Ukraine. They now have a partnership with them because some young mother with her 2 children showed up at their church and they invited them into their home, and they said, my pastor back home could probably use some help, and my husband that's not leaving could use some food, and a lot of medical and military kinds of things have been going on too. So your prayers and your involvement, so there were churches like yourself that we'd never heard of before that said, can we give, what are you guys doing in Poland? And God used this to, I made one phone call. I called a nonprofit, and 17 other nonprofits called me. In 2021, we had no nonprofits give to Polish Christian Ministries. We've had 18 in 2022. We've had over 40 churches like yourself that we didn't know about before 2022 and are now giving on a regular basis. And so I want to thank you for the response. God speaks into people's hearts, right? And we have the responsibility as the Holy Spirit speaks to respond. And I'm just here to say thank you, and also here to say what he is doing in Poland. I mean, he uses dollars to bring about his purposes, and a dollar is a dollar. It's important, but it's the means to how he is providing just wonderful things. The gospel is being lived out as physical needs are being met, but God always has in mind, when meeting a physical need, to bring about a spiritual response. And we're seeing that happening. And I'm here today with my wife, Sandy, to say thank you for being obedient to God's call in that.
Wonderful to have missionaries speak, because we don't know what goes on really outside even our own state, in so many ways. And that's kind of what I just wanted to finish talking about, kind of that. I just thank you so much for that, because a lot of you might have been like me when I was growing up. I grew up Catholic, and being in San Diego, when we had a missionary speaker, they were normally from South America, speaking Spanish, and you couldn't understand them. And then too, it seemed like we had a lot of ones from Africa, and you couldn't understand them. So what happened? As a kid, you started shutting down, and other people would even say it. And I've even heard some of the Hispanic people say, I just don't understand the Spanish that they're speaking because of the different. And so I really didn't really care much or think about missionaries until I got up to Minnesota and I started going to Bible college. And that's where it really kind of woke up. We, as Christians, we think of Matthew 28, bear with the call to reach the whole world. And so it's like I didn't really think about it much. And then I started meeting international students from Laos. Argentina was on, Haiti especially, and just other places, one or two from different countries. And then I'm like, well, what are you doing here? Well, and they would tell me their story. A lot like he said, how these people ran into the churches in their area. They started helping them with their physical needs, started sharing the gospel with them, and their parents are somehow they became Christians, and now they wanted to come up there to Minnesota Bible College. Remember, that was started to be a missionary type college way back in its founding. And so I'm talking to all these kids, and then I started getting a deeper understanding, especially the ones that came here from war-torn nations. And there was a few of them there. But then what really changed my heart for this is I was running the maintenance department at the time, and then Roger called me in and said, hey, we have a guy from Burma that's going to come. He doesn't speak any English. You got a mission this summer. And I'm like, I don't speak Burmese. And he goes, we're just going to have to work with him. And it was, and so I remember we would paint different things. This is brown, and this is different colors. And the simple words like, this is a door. And then at lunch, he had this thing to help teach him English from his, and we would sit there and go over that, and he would make me his food and everything. And so I started really to appreciate him, because in the summer too, besides him, there was the foreign students would stay there and they would work with me. And so we were doing all these different projects, and so I started picking their brains and all this, and I really realized how blessed we are here. You know, I learned that a lot growing in San Diego, but with Tijuana just across the border. But I never experienced in this way. And so working with Ruben over the time that we were there, you know, teaching him English and all that. But like the second year he was there, his family became Christians there, but they're not very friendly to Christians. And so I think it was actually the government that burned down their barn with all their rice right after harvest season. And so at church, he shared, or chapel, he shared a little bit about that. And this is the power of the church, I guess is the best way to put it. So we just took a collection, and you know, and I don't know exactly how much it was at the time or dollar amount, but all I know is when Ruben and me went in there to see Roger, because I ended up taking him to however you do them money transactions with Western Union or whatever, he goes, you know what? This is 4 years worth of money that my parents are going to get in one day because of the church. And that really, really touched me, because even though we complain about our 401s and stuff, now that darn American dollar is still powerful around the world, and how we can help people like that. And that was just such a wonderful witness, just to hearing him with tears in his eyes thanking me for that. And so, I don't know. I know what it's called, ICOM, right? The International
Conference on Missions.
Yeah, Conference on Missions. I went to one of those, a couple of them, but down there. I remember this one that it was in Illinois, and all I remember is like these speakers had such a passion for what they were doing. They came out of cities like this, out of the middle of nowhere, to go to a foreign country, and it just has to be the Holy Spirit that touches somebody's heart and life to say, hey, I don't want to stay in America in the comfort, and I do want to go to some place like Uganda or Central America and just do God's work. And it's just like, I would really love, it'd be great if we could all get a bus and go to that conference, because it would change your life, I really think, forever. We wouldn't worry about the 401k. We'd be worrying about that kid that you adopted over there through the organization. And the only time I've ever technically, this might sound weird, but the only time I've ever been on what I would consider as a real mission trip, when I took the kids from West Burlington to inner city Chicago to Roseland Community Daycare. If you look that up and you'll say, what were you doing there? It was scary, okay? There were signs, there was bars on everywhere. There were houses that just wasted. But we went there and we worked at this daycare, and it was so funny. The kids were having, I've been to Chicago before, and they're bouncing around. As soon as we got off the freeway, they locked the doors and closed their windows. It was scary. And we got to this area, and this little lady, Miss Pearl, who was an ex-prostitute, crackhead, and you name it, became a Christian, and that's what she was doing. And we went there, and she talked to everybody, and it was just life-changing for them. I mean, I remember the people just had tears in their eyes, and so I think it's great if we could get out there and just do what the gospel tells us to do in our own little part. And that's why we put that bucket out there, because we can't go over there. And so in a sense, David and Sandy are our hands and feet to do with what we can do for them. And so I think it's just wonderful that they were here, and it's how it came apart or came to come together. And we just need to thank God for that. And then he sent David here today with his wife for a very reason. And it's wintertime. And I guess, we're having our own energy crisis and stuff, so that means their energy bill is going to probably go through the roof this year. So that's just something to think about if you want to give today. So I just pray that you'll think about that, and I pray that you do give.